Today, we're diving into a story that's part political thriller, part leadership crisis, but really, at its heart, it's about a devastating family betrayal. We're talking about King David and his son, Absalom. To really get what's at stake here, you have to start with this idea. Think about it. Getting betrayed by a political rival, that stings, for sure. But from your own son or daughter? The source material calls that incomparably more devastating. And that one thought, man, that's the emotional core of this entire story. So where does a crisis like this even begin? Well, it wasn't with some big, flashy declaration of war. No, this started with a quiet, super meticulous, and frankly, brilliant political campaign. And the mastermind? None other than David's own son, Absalom. Absalom played the long game here, for 4 years. He starts by building this image, a fancy chariot, 50 guys running ahead of him, looking the part. But the real genius, it was his ground game. He'd go hang out at the city gate, which was basically the courthouse back then, and he'd intercept people on their way to see the king. He'd listen to their case and say, if only I were judge. And just like that, one person at a time, he literally stole the hearts of the people. Okay, so he's got the people on his side. Now he just needs an excuse to get his followers together, away from his dad's watchful eyes in the capital. So what does he do? He goes to King David with the perfect cover story, a religious vow. He says, "Hey Dad, I need to go to Hebron to fulfill a vow I made to God." And David, completely clueless, just says, "Go in peace." Big mistake. And choosing Hebron, that was no accident. This was a total masterstroke. First off, it was his hometown, so he had a home field advantage. Second, it was David's original capital city. So you've probably got a bunch of people there who are still a little bitter that David moved the capital to Jerusalem. And third, and this is key, it gave him an easy escape route just in case the whole thing went south. Super strategic. But here's the real kicker, the one move that made this rebellion feel unstoppable. Absalom manages to get David's most trusted, most cunning advisor, a guy named Ahithophel, to switch sides. Now, why would Ahithophel do that? Well, the sources hint at a really powerful motive. Turns out, Ahithophel was Bathsheba's grandfather. Yeah, that Bathsheba. So this whole thing, it might just be payback, years in the making. And just like that, the news hits Jerusalem. A messenger runs to David and says, "The hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom." The coup worked. And in that one moment, the mighty King David becomes a fugitive. Now, this is the part of the story that makes you scratch your head, right? This is King David we're talking about. The guy who fought Goliath, he's got a fortified city and loyal soldiers. So why on earth does he just run? Why abandon the throne without a fight? Well, it turns out it wasn't about being a coward at all. It was a calculated move, and it was all about mercy. He didn't want to see his own capital, Jerusalem, torn apart by a bloody civil war. He wanted to protect his people. And maybe the biggest reason of all, even after everything, he just could not bring himself to fight his own son. So he decides to flee. And what follows is just one of the most powerful, most humiliating moments in David's entire life. This isn't some strategic retreat with flags waving. This is a straight-up walk of shame. Just picture this. The king, who should be wearing a crown, is instead covering his head in shame. The man who sat on a throne is now walking barefoot up a mountain, and he and everyone with him are openly weeping. It is a total, gut-wrenching reversal of fortune. And we need to understand what covering the head meant back then. It wasn't just like pulling a hoodie over your face. No, this was a public, symbolic act. It was basically saying to the world, I am humiliated, I've lost everything, I'm totally disgraced. So, in the middle of all this chaos, the priests try to bring the Ark of the Covenant with them, the ultimate symbol of God's presence and power. But David stops them. He tells them to take it back to the city. It's like he's saying, I accept this. This might be God's judgment on me for my past sins. He's not just retreating from his son, he's surrendering to a higher will. And right here, at his absolute lowest point, fleeing for his life, David does what he always does when he's in trouble. He turns to poetry. He starts to write, processing all this pain and fear and faith into a psalm, a prayer that we can still read today. And to really feel the weight of this, think about it. David had been on the run before for years from King Saul. But that was different. That was politics. This was his son, his beloved child. The source puts it perfectly. This was incomparably more painful. It's a whole different level of hurt. And all of that raw personal agony gets poured right into the words of what we now know as Psalm 3. This isn't some abstract theological essay. It's a gut cry from a father and a king who has just lost everything, and he's writing it as he's fleeing for his life. The psalm just opens with this feeling of being completely overwhelmed. Lord, how many are my foes? It's like the whole world has turned against him, and people are mocking him, saying, he's done. God's not going to save him this time. But then something amazing happens. Right in the middle of all this despair, the psalm takes a sharp turn. David stops focusing on his enemies and his fear, and he starts declaring what he knows to be true deep down. This is the pivot point. Think about it. He is physically walking up a hill with his head covered in shame, but in his heart he writes, "But you, Lord, are a shield around me, the one who lifts my head high." He's realizing that his real honor, his glory, doesn't come from a crown or a throne. It comes from something much deeper. And then he says something that is just mind-blowing. He says, I lie down and sleep, I wake again, because the Lord sustains me. Can you even imagine? You're a fugitive. An army is hunting you, led by your own son. Sleep would be the last thing on your mind. And yet he's talking about sleeping in peace? That's a whole other level of trust. And that trust, that peace, it blossoms into pure courage. He looks at the tens of thousands of enemies all around him, and he decides, I will not fear. He's gone from shame to faith, and now to fearlessness. What a journey. And this is how the psalm ends, not with David begging for help, but with a powerful declaration. From the Lord comes deliverance. And get this, after all that betrayal from his own people, his very last line is a blessing for them. May your blessing be on your people. It's just a remarkable, graceful end to this whole emotional roller coaster. So this whole story leaves us with a really big question, doesn't it? When you think about it, David's private failures eventually led to this massive public crisis. His story seems to show a path back through humility, surrender, and this incredible faith. But it really makes you wonder, right? In our own lives, when our personal mistakes have public consequences, how do we find that path back? Where do we get the strength to believe that our head can be lifted high again?